The second part of the answer lies in finding better ways to strengthen the links between civil society and political life in non-partisan ways, which may sound like a contradiction, but I don't think it is. Because experience from around the world shows conclusively that it's those non-profits with the broadest and deepest networks and connections to institutional political actors like parties and parliaments that are most able to engage new opportunities for citizen participation and thus create the new public sensibilities we're looking for. In India, for example, that goal is being pursued through what's called non-party politics at the local level, in which candidates are nominated by social movements and NGO coalitions and not by established political parties, at least in theory. In South Africa, it's being pursued by coalitions in the non-profit sector like the Treatment Action Campaign, which have started to play some of the functions of an opposition against the background of one-party rule by the ANC. In Brazil and the Philippines, by electing civic leaders directly into office. And here in Northern Ireland, I know there are discussions about a platform for change in order, quote, to underpin a pre-electoral platform for new governing coalitions, an idea that's already been tried with some success actually in Poland, in Chile, in Indonesia and other places through civic forums. And I know here that is a controversial idea and there are many different opinions of it. But these forums do not compete in representative politics. They simply complement the formal system and help to address the inevitable failings that that system poses. And I think that is a crucial point, as David said, in assuaging the fears that face many elected officials when confronted by the diffusion of power to civil society that takes place under these new forms of democracy. Third, we need to understand and adapt to the structural changes that are taking place in our own world, in civil society itself, as a result of the drive for greater professionalisation, marketisation, commercialisation, government intervention and shifts in funding, especially at a time of financial crisis, since those trends may weaken the links I described between voluntary action and principled public politics. There were echoes of that already in this morning's discussion. I'm thinking, for example, of the widening gaps that are appearing in many civil societies between non-profit intermediaries, the civic elite, if you like, and those on whose behalf they claim to act at the grassroots level. The weakening of broad-based alliances and coalitions of non-profits are forced to compete with each other for scarce resources instead of to cooperate. And restrictions on more radical forms of civic action by governments under the banner of national security and the war on terror. Now, of course, the structures of civic life and the public sphere can themselves become fragmented along religious or ethnic lines. But that's not an argument, and I want to make this point strongly, that's not an argument against traditional or strongly bonded voluntary organisations, because a healthy civil society needs both strong bonds in order to offer solace, security and protection to weaker or smaller communities, and to provide a firm foundation on which bridges across those interests and identities can eventually be built. You need both to make a successful civil society. As I said before, we don't have to give up who we are in order to become part of a larger public project. We simply have to meld different elements of our shifting identities together in new ways through a variety, an ecosystem, you might think, of voluntary associations and relationships. Finally, we should not confuse civility with politeness. Originally, civility defined the qualities of a good citizen, that's the root of the term, and those qualities included argument, opposition, street protest, as well as the openness and flexibility required to reach consensus. The balance of straight back and soft front that loving politics requires, in a phrase that I hear increasingly actually in the United States. The straight back of principle and commitment to principle, the soft front of consensus building. Nor should we allow compacts between the voluntary sector and government to erode the independence, diversity and sheer, I'll celebrate this, bloody-mindedness of volunteers and voluntary organisations that mess up even the best bureaucrat's life, big time. Even though compacts of the kind you have here in the United Kingdom are clearly the best way to handle relations between the two. You know, politicians, present company accepted if there are any still in the room, I don't think there are, but if there are, tend to love civil society only until it disagrees with them. But we all benefit from a vibrant and independent voluntary sector and a free and engaged public sphere. The model we should aim for is what Brazilian activists call critical friendship, the loving but forceful encounters between equals who journey together towards the land of the true and the beautiful. Difference, let's remember, is the natural condition of all healthy societies. Difference is the natural condition of all healthy societies. Division and conflict are not. So how we deal with difference is what matters. And I think the kind of civic politics that we're beginning to experiment with all across the world is a very good way of handling that particular problem. Just to conclude, Martin Luther King lived and of course died for his belief that the synthesis of love and justice, social and personal rebirth, civil society and politics would deliver the beloved community of which he dreamed, knit together by compassionate understanding, heartfelt communication, and the bonds of human intimacy. But he also knew that creative, non-violent action of that kind might not win the day. It might not prove to be the dominant instrument of social change in the future. And writing in the aftermath of the events of September the 11th, 2001, Stuart Burns, who wrote a wonderful book about the civil rights movement called To the Mountaintop, said this in his conclusion, looking back on the King years. Will we inherit a future brokered by self-righteous terrorists, official or unofficial, hidden or public, formal or informal, and many masses of disempowered consumers, alienated from the world and even from their own souls, terrified to their bones? We who claim the legacy of Martin Luther King must cling to the raft of non-violence, in word and in deed, in passion and compassion, as determinedly and fixedly as he did during the last years of his life." End quote. That, in essence, is what it means to be an active citizen, language we've been using since we started our conversation this morning. That's what it means to volunteer your efforts for something larger and greater than your own immediate interests or identity. That's what it means to build a true, lasting and authentic civil society. That's what it means to create extremists who fight for the common good through the fusion of love and justice, of civic and political action, of the new, the old, and what's yet to come. So thank you for listening. I wish you the very best of luck in every aspect of your work. And I look forward to coming back to join you again in September when my next visit to Northern Ireland is on the agenda. Thanks very much.